He's an American journalist, syndicated columnist with Creator Syndicate, and author. He's also a former host of TV One News Now. I'm Mikayla Newton here with Roland Martin. Thank you so much for being here today.
Not a problem. How's it going?
Great. So today you're going to be giving the annual MLK commemoration speech. So what are some of the things that you're going to be talking about?
I have no idea.
No idea.
No, so here's the deal. I mean, look, there are themes that I typically would think about in terms of there are some thoughts that I have, but I have a different process when it comes to speaking. I really like to walk into the room and then allow the room to speak to me, to get a sense of what people say, what people feel. And there are numerous times where I literally will change the speech walking to the podium. And so I don't write speeches. And so it's great because I can change it whenever I want to. But one of the things that I will certainly deal with, and that is trying to try to have a conversation where MLK is not put in a historical box, but try to get folks today to understand how he is relevant and how what he talked about then, 67, 68, killed in 68, still applies today. And so for a lot of us, we've gotten caught up in this whole notion that somehow that the election of President Obama was the realization of Dr. King's dream, which is totally nonsense. Anybody actually had an understanding of what he talked about in that 63 speech, what he talked about in his book, Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here? And so really trying to make, again, the life of someone who lived 39 years relevant in 2018.
Okay, so one of the titles that I didn't give you was activist. Do you consider yourself to be an activist in the black community?
No. So am I an activist within the prism of journalism? Yes, because I'm very vocal when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to ownership, when it comes to us controlling our own narrative. And so I understand lanes. And so a lot of times people say, well, Roland, why don't you organize a march? That ain't my job. And so folks operate in different spaces. My responsibility lies in terms of coverage, in terms of what I do. If you look at historically, Frederick Douglass was a journalist, but when he had the North Star, that was a different moment in time. Ida B. Wells Barnett, journalist. You also, of course, then you go through Robert Abbott, who founded the Chicago Defender, Claude Burnett, who had the Associated Negro Press, Wire Service, and of course you had other folks like Alice Dunnigan and Ethel Payne and Lerone Bennett, the late Simeon Booker, who just passed away. I mean, these were all black journalists. Vernon Jarrett, these were black journalists who used the power of their pen, radio, and television as well, to speak to the issues that matter to us. That's a different form. And so what I do is different from what a Reverend Jackson does. It's different from what Black Lives Matter activists do. And so a lot of times people get that confused when my job is to highlight and elevate what they do, but within my industry, certainly you can say I'm an activist in some of those areas.
So do you think today that MLK's dream is being lived out?
Well, actually, I think we spend way too much time focused on MLK's dream. So I use it this way. When somebody is dreaming, they're asleep. So the question is, are we focused on his dream, or are we focused on the reality? And so when people talk about even this notion of a dream, they're speaking of his speech from 1963, August 28th, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Too many people haven't even actually listened to the entire speech. They haven't even read the entire speech. The dream portion wasn't even in the original speech. The speech was called Normalcy No More. And so the actual document that was put together, that wasn't in the speech. It wasn't until he was actually speaking and Mahalia Jackson was over his right shoulder and she began to say, Dr. King, tell him about the dream, tell him about the dream. He had given variations of that dream speech a number of times leading up to August 28th. I mean, he had given a significant portion of that just a couple of months earlier at the massive rally that took place in Detroit. And so So what Americans do, largely white Americans, they'll focus on the dream aspect, and that is content of character. Why can't we all get along? Black kids playing with white kids. But in order for you to get to that part, you gotta bypass everything else he said about police brutality, about check being stamped insufficient funds, about how black folks were being treated, about the right to vote. See, so you can't get to that bottom part unless you go through the top 2/3 part. And so when we automatically focus on the bottom part, the dream part, you got to deal with the rest of that stuff before you get to the dream part. See, that's the key. If we can't have a discussion about the bottom 2/3 of a speech and ignore the top 2/3 and then wonder, well, why haven't we realized the bottom 1/3? Because you haven't dealt with the top 2/3.
Right. Okay, and lastly, Donald Trump just gave his State of the Union address. So what do you think about the current state of our union?
Well, that night I actually put on my own event called The Real State of Our Union. We talked about the things that night at Shiloh Baptist Church. I did it in partnership with the NAACP, and you were not going to hear in his speech. You did not hear him talk about voter suppression. You did not hear him talk about the need for wage growth. You did not hear him talk about poverty and the impact on Americans all across the country. You did not hear him talk about any of those issues because that's not what he cares about. And so he wanted his State of the Union speech to be all about him. You saw him just complaining that it was treason that Democrats didn't stand up and clap for him. This is a narcissist. This is someone who needs adulation, who needs to be to say, oh my God, you're great, you're wonderful. I mean, there really is no difference between him and the North Korean leader because they need that constant affirmation of how great they are. And I think if he decides to ever leave the White House and stop going to Palm Beach or going to his club in New Jersey, he will see the reality that there's a whole different America out there, and all those clueless white folks running around in their little red "Make America Great Again" hats don't even realize how screwed they are because they've fallen for the okie doke. This is a man who talked about the opioid crisis on the campaign trail, but he's done nothing. He literally put a 24-year-old guy in a major policy position over his opioid or over his drug office, and the only thing on his resume, dude was a Boy Scout leader. That was it. Now, nothing against 24-year-olds, but he has no business in that particular job. And so you see Trump slashing the drug czar office. Why? You got a massive opioid problem. And so all those folks, they fell for the banana in the tailpipe. And they're running around saying, oh my God, Trump is great. And I'm going, y'all are screwed. Now, we know. That's why I use the hashtag. We tried to tell you. So they're running around thinking everything is great, happy about the tax cut, until they realize that they're going to now target the very programs they need to pay for the tax cut. Then they're going to be crying and saying, oh my God, what happened? Because you idiots supported a nonsensical policy plan.
So thank you so much, Roland Martin, for meeting here with me today. As always, you can subscribe to GSTV on YouTube. I'm Mikayla Newton for Panther Report.